at this point, I know exactly like how much to dose myself, what I'll feel as a result of it. And I can also make sure I'm not putting myself in situations that would make me uncomfortable, because in some of these expert scenarios that we're going to talk through, I still, like to this day, like over 100 trips in, I don't think I would want to ego death in an incredibly like public or intense place or whatever. I'm Yuki, joined by my co-host Reggie, and you're listening to Modern Day Hippie, the podcast about doing drugs in a responsible, fun, and safe way to improve your life. Before we jump into today's episode, a quick legal disclaimer. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Our goal is to educate and inform others about the realities of substance use in an engaging format. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to attempt to recreate anything found in this episode or any of our other content. We are not confessing to any acts stated in this podcast. The content in this episode should not be treated as factual or real in any way. Now, with that, we hope you enjoyed today's show.
What's up, Yuki? How you been, man?
Hey, Reggie. Doing well. Excited for today's episode. We're going to be talking about what originally started for us as coining the term different prestiges of tripping. So inspired by kind of video games where you prestige through the levels. It's like there is some tripping experience you can have early on, let's say at a beginner level. And then there are other tripping experiences you should really reserve for a fifth or a 10th prestige, as we like to say, which ultimately means just like expert tripping experience. But before we dive into the main content for today, I have a question to pose to you, Reggie.
What's up?
Have you ever had the thought of like what drug you see yourself like most likely becoming addicted to? Like if you were to ever get addicted to a substance, like what would that be, and what makes you say that?
Honestly, I feel like I already know the answer because it's happened to me, and it's weed. Like it's just because it's like so accessible and easy, and it just makes you so lazy. So it's like you just want to keep on smoking it every day. At least I did whenever I was smoking weed all the time. Other than that, though, the other one that I would be a little bit worried about getting addicted to, but I don't really do this drug super often, is Adderall for sure. Just because it's like gives you such a dopamine rush. And I feel like I would just, if I did enough Adderall, I would just become dependent on it. I don't know. What about you?
Do you think for the Adderall point, is it strictly the dopamine aspect, or is it kind of having it tied to productivity? Because like for reference, my experience with Adderall is relatively like not a lot. I've probably done Adderall less than a dozen times at this point. And for me, I found it'll like keep me awake. It might make me a little bit jittery, but I haven't, I think, quite experienced what you were mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a problem if you do it every once in a while. And if you're just doing it for productivity every once in a while, it's not a problem. I think the problem occurs when you start to take it every day, whether you have ADHD or not. And I would just worry that like if for some reason I decided that I needed to be super productive every day and I took Adderall every day, then I know that I would like end up being dependent on it, which I'm just not down to do that.
No, definitely not. We do not condone a addiction to pharmaceutical grade meth.
Yeah. Also, Adderall of all drugs is the definition of borrowing time from the future. Like one of the 10 commandments. Like you really don't need Adderall, honestly, in most cases, unless you have ADHD, I guess. But
yeah, exactly. Which most people who take it do not have ADHD. Yeah. No, the reason I asked that question is because I was thinking about it this past weekend. I kind of unexpectedly did a bit of ketamine on Friday night with a buddy. We were just like hanging out. I had some on me. He wanted to get some from me as well. And so we just hung out and talked for probably like 2-ish hours on a bit of ketamine. And dude, we had so much fun. Like we hadn't seen each other in a while. We were just like catching up, kind of reconnecting. And like it was a fun time. I was like, I just thoroughly enjoyed this drug, and definitely not doing it super often, like still like at most once every 2 weeks probably. But I did go down that train of thought of like, this drug is really fun. It kind of makes me feel like warm and fuzzy inside, like kind of it makes like your whole body numb in a sense. But you still have control of your body. It's not like what I've heard Xanax is like, where it literally turns you into a vegetable that cannot move. It's like more like the outer layer of my skin feels like fuzzy and numb a little bit, but I can still move just fine. And then on Saturday was hanging out with some friends, and we were also just chilling, like had a couple of drugs on hand. And I was like, let me do some ketamine again. And it was hitting so much less than the night before because I'd only been a 24-hour difference.
That
I'm like,
makes a lot
man,
of sense.
yeah. And it's like, if I wanted to feel anything remotely similar to what I did even 24 hours prior, I would need to do a lot more. And so I'm like, I see how this tolerance could build up, and kind of just had this train of thought of like, okay, if I were to get addicted to a drug, which I think the only drug I've ever actually been addicted to in a sense was alcohol, maybe not in a chemical way, but very much in like a social and in personality manner. So that was a thought that I was wrestling with the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And just a side note on Xanax, I've done Xanax a few times, and at least for me personally, I feel like it doesn't really turn you to a vegetable unless you're drinking on it. And that's when it
Right.
becomes like a big problem.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I feel like every time I've seen someone on Xanax, they've also been drinking, and
Yeah.
it is actually like, it's embarrassing to see them like that. And
It's embarrassing to be like that, man. Like,
no, of course. Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And like when it's my friend, I'm like, dude, like this is not good. This is not healthy. I hope you're okay. That kind of stuff. Yeah. And honestly, like I still want to try Xanax like one time, and then probably never again, just like see what it's like. But that's about it.
I've got some in my drawer, man, if you want some.
All right, bet. Well, I'll pick some up soon. Sweet.
All right, Yuki, let's talk about the different levels of tripping. You want to start us off with the beginner tier?
Yeah, totally. So we've organized these into beginner, intermediate, experts. Again, going off of our the joke we used to have about different prestiges of tripping. Beginner, let's say it's, first 3 to 5 trips that you have. Of course, it does depend a little bit on the actual substance, but this is just kind of general guidelines that we recommend when your first couple of trips. So the first one that came to mind for me was tripping in a pretty like isolated environment that you're comfortable with. So most commonly, this is just your own home, your apartment, your room, whatever, a place that you're completely comfortable in, and it's your own like personal area. And that tends to be one of the best recipes for not getting any like anxiety or paranoia that might come up if your first trip or two is out somewhere incredibly public.
Yeah, and it gives you the opportunity to just experience the effects of the drug, and you can have a little bit of fun with it, watch some TV, like see some cool visuals.
Yeah, no, and it's actually funny. Something that I notice on psychedelics, but on drugs in general, is if I'm doing them at home and like watching TV, let's say, I'll be sitting down pretty much the whole time. But sometimes it's just fun standing up and like walking around, like trying to move and observing how the drug will affect like those different things that you do outside of just, seeing with your eyes and hearing. And that can be cool. Just like when you're at home, let's say you're tripping with a friend or a couple of friends, like, you don't have to worry about like looking stupid or weird. You can really just be yourself and do all these like wacky things without any stress or like fear of judgment.
Yeah, the other type of trip that I'd say is beginner level is tripping at a park or any kind of like nature environment where there aren't very many people. And especially if you have like a trip sitter or someone who's either sober or also even tripping with you, just so that you're not alone.
Yeah, I think what's especially nice is, let's say you like start your trip at home and then you get your trip sitter to drive you to a nearby hike, and kind of guide you on that hike. And, they should know where they're going. You kind of just like follow along and be along for that ride. And I will say in general for parks, like some parks can be more crowded sometimes. Obviously, depends where you are. Try to be in one that's like not super populated at the time that you're tripping. But I think tripping on hikes is a really pleasant experience. Again, as long as you're confident in knowing where you're going, if it's a place you're already super familiar with, or you have a friend who is familiar with the trail, or is like aware of the map and how to read it. And generally, if it's, as long as it's a trail, it's not super popular, you might pass a couple people, but, either it's just like a simple hi, or you just don't even have to say anything. And that'll kind of minimize any anxiety that you might get from having to interact with people. Because I know for me, when I'm tripping, and especially earlier on, I would definitely get anxiety from having more like the expectation that I should be interacting with people.
Yeah, and I'll say on that note, I personally do not like to trip around like kids or families just because I think it's a bad look, and I don't even want to be someone who exposes a kid to someone who's tripping, even if they can't notice it. So I try to personally avoid parks that have a lot of families in them or something like that.
That's fair. Yeah, I agree with that. It's definitely not a vibe like with like a family nearby when you're just tripping and trying to just like vibe and like hang out with your friends and talk and goof off.
Yeah, you might be too focused on like acting normal as opposed to just enjoying the trip, which is what you really should be doing on your first trip. Like you want to enjoy it and let yourself go, see all the visuals, stare at the clouds or whatever, you know.
Yeah, completely agree. And kind of a general rule of thumb for beginner trips is never trip like completely alone. So either have kind of a designated trip sitter who's staying sober and is just around, or someone who's just taking less and can be that responsible person if they need to be. And also like trip with a couple of people, you know, like 1, 2, or 3 friends that you really trust and fuck with. Like that will make the experience so much more pleasant. And if you're at a point in your trip where you're getting really in your head or you're getting some anxiety, you know, just having a conversation with a friend will completely like distract you from that feeling. And like, it's just more fun with people. Like drugs, 99% of the time are just more fun with people. And the first few times you trip, I would definitely recommend doing it with friends. Like there's a lot to be said about having introspective reflections when you're tripping, but I would put that more in the like intermediate category.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And honestly, like if your first trip, dude, like have fun with it. Like you don't need to be doing all that introspective stuff on your first time. You really want to understand the drug first. However, I will say I know people that really wanted to do it by themselves on their first trip, and they did. But my only advice for if you do decide to go down that route, even though we don't necessarily recommend it, is at least have someone else in the vicinity that knows you're tripping so that even if you're not interacting with them the entire trip, if something does happen, like they're there for you, they know what's going on and they could help you out.
Yeah, I was literally going to say, like, have someone on call if you are going to trip alone. Even if you're more experienced, it's just good to let somebody know. Like, I very much have a rule where if I am doing a drug on my own, or if I'm doing a different drug from the group that I'm with, let's say at a concert or something like that, I will tell at least one person like what I'm doing, because you just want other people to be aware. Whether you need help with something, whether something goes really wrong, they should just have a general sense of what state of mind you're in. Because even from one drug to another, that can be very different. Like a week ago, I was at a concert with 3 or 4 friends, and I think one of them was drinking, another one took Molly. I was just doing ketamine, a tiny bit of 2CB, and then I think my girlfriend was just doing 2CB, and we're all on different substances. We're all like having fun and like vibing with each other. But it was good to know what everybody was on. So it's like, oh yeah, I know this person might be acting this way because of the drug that they're on, or you know, when it was time to leave, like I knew that my drugs had worn off more than the rest of the groups. So it's like, okay, I can lead the way to finding an Uber to get us home. So things like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Moving on to the intermediate category, or the intermediate level rather, of tripping.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Let's say this is anywhere from 5 trips in to could be 10, 15, even more. Here, the range becomes a lot wider depending on the experiences that you want to have.
And just out of curiosity, before we move on to that, your first trip, Yuki, was it by yourself or with a group, or was everyone in your group tripping if you had one? I don't remember what you told me, to be honest.
Yeah. So my first ever trip was LSD, going to a concert. So took it before the concert and we Ubered there, and it was me and 2 other friends.
Yeah, that's a solid first trip. My
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
trip was in a park.
Dude, that's a great spot. Honestly, potentially even better than a concert because, like I've mentioned with other drugs, the first time you do a drug, you're probably not going to feel it all the way because you're just going to miss a lot of the details that might come with it. And I think in the concert setting, I definitely felt it to an extent. But since there was just a lot of stimulus from the lights and the music, it was hard to tell, you know, what was the drug and what was just, you know, effects at this music venue that we were at. And actually, on the note of concerts, in the intermediate category, I'd say towards the bottom end of the category, I would put like a concert tripping experience. This one could also be kind of like late beginner, I would say. And to be honest, a lot of you are probably going to have your first trips or have had your first trips in like a concert setting. The nice thing about that is when you're in a crowd, it really makes you feel like an anonymous figure. Like you're usually not stressing too much about like, oh, what does the person next to me think? Because there's just so many bodies. And let's be honest, most people there are probably also doing drugs. So like no one's going to try to like report you or shit like that. As long as you're not being a dumbass or an asshole, like just chill and you'll be totally good. I will caveat that with the fact that if you are going to trip out a concert, definitely do it with a group of people who are all on the same vibe, just so you know you're on the same page with people. It makes the experience more fun because everyone's having a similar experience with the music and the lights and whatever is going on. And it also just makes you feel more comfortable knowing that like you're not alone. Again, if you get a little bit of anxiety or paranoia, it's like, oh, hey, let me turn to my friend over here and he's experiencing the exact same thing.
Cool. And then on that same note of intermediate trips, I would say being at a public park with people in it would be an intermediate trip. So like, maybe a place that you are a lot more likely to run into people where you might have to interact with someone or talk to someone.
Yeah, I would say obviously the park range can be very wide. You can be in the middle of nowhere in a national park, or I have literally tripped in Central Park where there's like literally crowds of people around you.
That was a fun trip. Central Park's a great place to trip.
Yeah, it was fun, but I tripped really fucking hard, and I definitely got a bit of anxiety doing that on like 3 tabs of acid. But another story.
Right, you told me about that. So you got ego death, right?
Yeah, I think it was one of the first times I ego death actually.
That's a good little like tidbit to include, because unfamiliar environments like that, like you weren't like living in New York for a long period of time at that point, and you hadn't like spent too much time in Central Park. So unfamiliar environments like that.
Yeah, and like I was also tripping with a girl I had met on Tinder the night before. So it was like complete stranger, completely new place. I literally, my leg was in a fucking boot at the time too. Like I was able to walk on it, but I was like, my leg was still in the process of healing from being fractured. So definitely a lot of unsafe practices there that I would not recommend.
Yeah, man, you're asking for ego death if you take 3 tabs in an unfamiliar environment with a new person and then a boot on your leg that you're not used to having.
Yeah, that was a very just like fuck it time in my life. But hey, you learn from your mistakes.
Cool. The other intermediate trip I would say is hitting DMT out of a cart, and that's like as opposed to hitting it out of a rig, because DMT out of a cart is like kind of chill, but it's still DMT. So I would personally recommend having some experience with tripping before doing DMT. But the nice thing about the cart is that you can really easily moderate how much you're actually intaking, which is good for like an intermediate level.
Right. And so you can make sure you don't take so much that you're absolutely just like off the wall tripping.
Yeah. And it only lasts like 10 minutes or 15 minutes or something like that. Maybe even 30, depending on how much you take. So it's not as much of a commitment either.
Dude, speaking of that, I don't remember who, but I think a friend of ours in college would hit a DMT cart like every day on his walk to class. He had a 15, 20-minute walk to class, just had a dab pen with a DMT cart. I'm like,
dude,
you are yeah, like you're a fucking animal for that. I don't know if I should be amazed or like scared for you. Yeah, no, that's nuts. Yeah, and I would also say, wrapping up the intermediate tier, I think for both beginner and intermediate, I wouldn't recommend a super out there heroic dose of these drugs. Like the nice thing with psychedelics is you can take a ton and you won't like overdose in the traditional sense. It's nothing that will kill you. It might addle your mind a little bit, sometimes temporarily, for some people permanently with pre-existing conditions. So that is something to just be wary of, that can happen. But I would say until you get into more of the expert range, which is, I would say like 24 trips plus, is when I think it's more comfortable to start experimenting with these like bigger doses and experiencing ego death. And that's when you really get into like, I think the deeper parts of these experiences where you learn a lot of things about yourself and you can trip on your own and get more out of that experience on like a personal level.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's necessarily a tolerance thing, or if it's just like an experience thing, like being comfortable on it. I'm not really sure how that works, but because I know that the actual like chemical tolerances for most psychedelics are pretty short.
Yeah. For me, like, we've both tripped easily over 100 times now, probably more. It is very much a comfort thing. Like now when I trip, it feels like a familiar feeling. It almost feels like being in like a different home in a sense. Like it just feels comfortable. It's like I know what this is. At this point, I know exactly like how much to dose myself, what I'll feel as a result of it. And I can also make sure I'm not putting myself in situations that would make me uncomfortable, because in some of these expert scenarios that we're going to talk through, I still, like to this day, like over 100 trips in, I don't think I would want to ego death in an incredibly like public or intense place or whatever.
Yeah, especially if you're mixing other drugs, which brings us to the expert tier.
Here we go. Here we go. So expert level, this is like, you're tripping connoisseur. You tried a couple of different psychedelics. You've done a lot of different experiences, both with groups and maybe experimenting on your own.
And you probably
Um,
consider yourself a psychonaut at this point.
yeah, that's true. So the first bullet that we have here, and kind of most obvious thing at the expert level, is being able to trip in very public or crowded places on anything that's more than a microdose. So I think actually one of the things that spawns our use of this term of prestiges of tripping, Reggie, was we went to an amusement park for an entire day with a group of, what was it, like 6 to 8 people.
Mm.
And I think every one of us, or almost every one of us, did some psychedelics. Some people acid, some people shrooms, and we were tripping pretty hard. And this is an amusement park. Like there's
Dude, I did
people
acid
fucking,
and shrooms that
God.
day.
Yeah, and like we're waiting in lines for, like an hour, like we're surrounded by people. And that was definitely a situation where I'm like, I would not want to be doing this on my first trip. Like if it was an earlier trip, let's say I was more beginner, intermediate, I would do maybe a microdose, like just for the vibes, but I wouldn't like all out trip like we did when we went to this theme park.
Yeah, and that's advice not just for like you personally, like as in like not like you, Yuki personally, but just like anyone listening personally. That's also just advice for the people that you're going to be around. Like you don't want to be that guy who can't handle their drugs in public. You know what I mean? Like that's super embarrassing.
Dude, yeah, that's honestly a great topic to talk about. Like I've done drugs with a lot of people and in different groups, different settings. And the number one rule there is just like, don't become a liability. Like try to be just smart enough and knowledgeable enough about what you're doing to keep yourself safe, because if you do something wrong, something goes wrong, then it could implicate the whole group, and it will definitely like stress out other people. So definitely do everything in your power to not be a liability. And if you do become one in the middle of your trip or whatever drug you're taking, like it's okay. It honestly happens to everyone, like at least once. It happens to the best of us. But like let someone know who you trust, and more likely than not, they can be there for you and just sit by you and reassure you and just whatever you need at that moment. Now, for the other parts of expert level tripping, I would kind of split it up across 3 different criteria. Number 1 is being comfortable taking those higher doses. So experiencing ego death, I'm talking like 2 tabs of acid and up, like 4+ grams of shrooms, and really having like an intense experience. And even for those at the expert level, would still recommend doing those in settings that are more beginner friendly. So in your apartment, in a very chill park, things like that. Number 2 criteria is going more solo on your own, like being able to have a solid trip by yourself, experiencing that, doing whatever you want on yourself, reflecting, art. There's a lot of like interesting ideas and activities that you can do that I've seen other people do. And then the third category is experimenting with mixing of different drugs. So combining it with MDMA or ketamine, or there's quite a few drugs that mix especially well with psychedelics.
Or
Reason
weed.
being,
Unless you're a
yeah,
stoner, in which case like you'll probably be fine, but you just gotta be careful with the whole your short-term memory getting shot when you smoke too much weed on psychedelics, because you're probably not going to realize how much you smoked whenever your brain is like all active off the psychedelics. And that is like not a super comfortable feeling. I will say, like from personal experience, whenever you can't even remember what you just said, but you're still fully functioning because you're tripping, like that's not super comfortable. honestly. Unless you're by yourself and it doesn't really matter. But if you're trying to have a conversation, like, it can get frustrating.
Yeah, totally. No, and the nice thing about psychedelics and their potential for mixing is that psychedelics are neither an upper or a downer. They're their own category of drug that just affects different parts of your body. And so because of that, it's generally safe to mix a lot of psychedelics with other like common drugs that you might do. So like weed, like ketamine, like MDMA, like there would have to be very intense experiences, but those chemicals don't have, any like negative interactions like others might have. And
and
honestly,
check out our drug mixing chart in the description for more details on mixing drugs.
Yeah, and I just realized I don't know if I've ever done coke on any form of psychedelic. It's possible I have, but I'm like, that's one combination where I'm not sure I would enjoy, because I just thought I'm like, the one drug I'd recommend definitely not mixing with psychedelics is just alcohol in any form. That's something I've stayed clear away from, and I don't recommend for anyone. But I think the other one I like have a question mark on in my head is coke, and if I've ever mixed those.
Honestly, I've done both coke and alcohol on psychedelics, and it's not, there's no point in really doing it, to be honest. Like, if you don't do like crazy doses, like, you'll be fine, probably. But you're not doing yourselves any favors at that point. Like, you're not going to have a much better experience.
Yeah,
Especially
that's a great.
Like, your alcohol will, like, in my opinion, alcohol just kind of takes away from the tripping.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's very much about augmenting a different aspect of that experience. So a psychedelic will generally make your vision and potentially your hearing different in that setting. And so you can pair that with something like MDMA to make you extremely like happy and just like active. So those can be very kind of symbiotic substances to take in parallel.
And on that note of mixing psychedelics with like cocaine, it's, even though like some people will be able to do it and get away with it, like, it's actually a pretty bad idea, because it might increase your heart rate too much, and it's just really bad for like your heart and your liver. So we definitely just don't recommend that.
Yeah, and also, to be fair, I think that's just coke in general, like not a high tier drug.
It also just depends on how you react to the psychedelics. If you're someone whose heart rate's going to go up from anxiety, not even like directly from the psychedelics, but if you get anxiety while tripping and then you do coke and that gives you more anxiety or something, like, that's not very healthy for you.
Yeah, totally. Definitely better to avoid that one. Yeah, but just to recap the episode before we wrap up. So yeah, beginner, intermediate, expert. Generally, beginner will be in environments that you're more comfortable with, essentially less sources of potential anxiety or paranoia, probably going with a group or a trip sitter. And then as you move up towards intermediate and expert, it's really branching out into more public places where there might be more interactions with other people, or tripping on higher doses by yourself and having more of like the introspective experiences that can come with psychedelics.
Thank you all for listening, and that's the pod.
Truly, thank you for listening to the show. We seriously fucking appreciate it. If you want to help us out, just leaving a rating or a comment, the drill, would be incredibly helpful. But more importantly, share the knowledge and the love with your friends. Make sure they're getting the information they need on this topic that is so underserved and underappreciated in today's society. We'll see y'all next week.